I'm going to speak on the quality of Swami and will power. Those are two words. I'm going to tell a story that includes both. I'm going to tell a few stories. But first I would just wanted to, just a very simple one that we can all identify with. We were home very, very late one night. I think we pulled into Swami's house. We had been traveling and it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm helping Swami out of the car. He's going to his door. He says, well, I better sit down and do at least 14 kriyas to keep my hat in the ring. It's an expression we use. But and I was very impressed because we were tired. It had been a long trip, and there he was, just right there with will, with energy, with also a great lesson for me. And another time, when he lived at Ananda, Assisi, he lived there for 6 years, and we had a regular pattern. When we had to go to town, he liked the particular fresh fruit stop. He had an electronics store that we sometimes went to, depending on if he had a need. And he was definitely liked electronics and all the new technology, and he used it. He always had needed hearing aids, and he got good, high-quality hearing aids. And he said, "I'm in a position. I need to hear what people are saying to me, and I need to know what's going on." But this particular time, we're in town, and we were going to go to town, I'm sorry, and somebody brought him the thing that he had intended to go and get. And so he said, my name was Mark at the time, not Anand. He said, "Mark, you know, I said I was going to go, and I think we should go anyway, even if it's nothing but to go in and get a cappuccino and come home, because I said I was going to go." And that's the way he was. He always encouraged us to do those little things, even if they seem insignificant. If it was a matter of using willpower, training willpower, I said I was going to do some, and even if they're little things, that's how he said, and that's how Master taught him, that you do little things to accomplish and follow them through in order to accomplish a great power of will. He, at one time in his life, you could tell that his hips were deteriorating, and he had a bad arthritis in his hips, and he was with a group of people in Italy, and he was walking, but there was so much pain that he was very quiet. And he told me afterwards, many people thought I was antisocial or somehow was in a mood, but I needed to use every bit of willpower to get to where I was going, because to where I could sit down and get the weight off my hips, because and he ended up then, of course, having to have both hips replaced. So the doctor said, really, it's a ball in a socket, and he said they were worn. The doctors, I've never seen anything like it. I don't know how you tolerated this as long as you did. It gave, really, those hips gave Swami a whole new life, gave him mobility again. In fact, we often called Swami our bionic Swami, because he had titanium hips. He had a heart valve, an artificial heart valve. He had laser treatment on his eyes. He had ear apparatus. He was quite phenomenal in that way, but he used all the latest technology just to try to keep going into serve. And there was a time where he'd always said, I don't want heroics. When it's time for me to go, I don't want to be to go onto life support system, and in fact, the day he died, I was a little bit uncomfortable, I have to admit, because it was obvious what was happening. He had gone through this process sitting at his table. He was sitting up, he had just checked his emails, but this whole wave had gone through his body, where you could just like we do energizations, and he had just tensed and relaxed and exhaled, and that was his last breath. Until some minutes later, I think Sergio was chanting Om in his right ear, and he started to breathe again. But the point is that we could have right then called a doctor, we could have called the ambulance, but he had been very, very plain. And in fact, the night before with tea with him, he said, "It's just impossible that the Agastya records are right. I can't use this body for another 4 or 5 years." So he was even in a way, I think, telling us that the night before, that this body, he said, "I'll stay in it if I can be of service or if Master wants, but really." And so he just let go, and I have to admit, I just had to train my mind in order to let him go and not sort of move toward trying to do something. We turned him, we changed his position, there were things that we tried to do just to see if we could get him to breathe and to come back. But once that final breath had happened, we really had to accept that was what it was. But he was very, very firm in that way, and there was power. I wanted to also share another story in that respect of will, of wanting things to go a particular way. We all know his story with meeting Nehru and accomplishing in Delhi in the green zone. I think they called it the green zone. I can't remember what they called it. The green belt. That you weren't supposed to build, but Nehru had given him permission. And he told some of us that probably that was really a result of willpower, but didn't necessarily mean it was right, because he had used will and he had accomplished something that he felt could have been extraordinary for the work, but it also had very serious results in getting him kicked out of his guru's organization and that kind of thing. So he never actually said it was a right or a wrong. He just said it was a lot of willpower, and that willpower worked, and it got me right up to the point of what I wanted. But he also looked at the result, and he always sort of left me hanging in that particular manner, because he did also produce Ananda because of that exit. So that in itself was also a very positive thing that resulted from Swami's willpower. But I wanted to just finish my part with another story, because since you talked about his discipline, when I first came to Ananda, I had invested in a piece of property, and so I had a monthly payment that the wages in the Ananda community couldn't pay me that extra amount of money that I needed. So I continued to do my trade outside of Ananda. I lived on the land and in Ananda community, but I worked outside. So every day I traveled out of the community to my job. And yeah, you can move in off the edges if you need to. In fact, this is a pretty dry zone up here if you want to come up here in the middle. And at one point I stopped into a local Ananda cafe that we had in town. It was called Earth Song. It was really a beautiful little health food store and restaurant. And Jyotish and Devi were in there, and Swami was in there, and I greeted them and said, "Oh, nice to see you all." And Swami said, "Look, every Wednesday or Tuesday, we have the four of us get together, a little group of us, with just particular individual members in the community. Why don't you come this next Wednesday night?" And so I came, and Swami said, "We just thought we should talk because are you still benefiting from working outside of the community?" And so I started to explain, well, I would love to have an internal job, but the wages were such I couldn't. And they said, "Well, maybe now that could happen." And I said, my trade, if you will, was electromechanical devices, heating systems and microwaves and refrigeration and heating and cooking and those kinds of pumps and generators, those kinds of things. And I had attended a couple of years in a vocational technical institute, and so I explained to him, I said, well, I go into people's homes, sometimes 10 people's homes a day, and to work on their heating systems or their appliances or this, that, the other thing. And he said, well, you could at least take somebody from the community, and that way you'd have also a positive environment. And I said, yeah. And then I said, and another thing I could do for Ananda is maybe I could take a building. Swami said, yeah, I've always wanted at Ananda what's called a why buy it shop. Why buy it? Repair it is what he meant. He said, we throw away so much in America, and we should be repairing and using things more. And I said, yeah, I could do that, Swami, and I could put some people together, and that would be something I could do for Ananda. And I had said that apparently enough times to where all of a sudden, like an explosion, and my name wasn't Anand at the time, it was still Mark, but he just yelled at me, "Mark, forget Ananda! Just forget Ananda!" And everybody in the room, the little group that we were with, there was this shock. And there was this pregnant silence where nobody moved, and I was processing, wow. And and he reaches over and he pats me on the leg and he said, "Look, I saw Dr. Lewis once saying to Master this, that, Master, but I want to do this for you, I want to do this." And Master said the same thing. He said, "Doctor, do it for God." And he said, and Swami said to me, "Your motivation isn't for God. Your motivation was to do it for Ananda." And it's very interesting because I had grown up in the Catholic Church, and the message in the Catholic Church was, or is, we are the right way, the only way. I'd gone to SRF, a little bit of the same thing. We are the right way, the only way. Master started his organization a little bit like the Catholics say about Christ. Christ started that church, and today it still lives. And I think Swami saw that in me because I was doing the same thing with Ananda. And he didn't want me to do it for Ananda. He wanted me to develop a personal relationship. That my motivation was for doing it for God, not to do it through the channel or not to do it for the organization. But then, so I got the message. Everybody relaxed. They're like, "Oh, okay." This was just before a satsang. We came out into the Crystal Hermitage. The place was just full for his evening satsang. He sat down and gave a talk on how you can serve Master through serving Ananda. I mean, it was the very thing he told me not to do. And I realized how individual it was. He knew I had that tendency. He could see that I lacked not the ability, but the understanding to do it for God. And so he lambasted me, poof, like that, just about, to make sure I got the message, and then gave a message I've told the community who didn't really have that problem. In fact, there needed to be a little more dedication to what we were building as Ananda. So the teaching is individual, and he could be very strong in order to drive a point home, but I always saw that he did it in order to for your betterment, for your benefit. And so and he told me once, he said, I know Master hated disciplining people, and I don't like disciplining people, but he would, and if he saw that it could help, he would. I could tell he didn't like it. I saw him with other people. He didn't like it, but if he felt it could help, he would do it. It's really, I believe it's what you really want to see in a friend, is a friend who will tell you, a friend will tolerate you, and a friend will give us unconditional love. But that should be to a point where if you can help them, then we should say it. But we also need to be very sensitive about the line that exists between whether they're ready to hear it or whether they're not. Because if they're not ready to hear it, then you shouldn't give them the message. Be their friend, give them your unconditional love. But when they are ready to hear it, if they need your help in that way, then a true friend would give it rather than holding it back. So the teaching is very individual, and Dharmini's absolutely right. You will have to follow the heart and try to feel what's right in this particular moment, because the teaching isn't always the same. It isn't a black and white situation. It's a situation that is applicable to the moment and to that particular situation. Thank you.